Good morning, good afternoon, good afternoon. I always mess up the intro
Good
to
afternoon.
Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai. Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai. You know you're on the right podcast because I've messed up the intro again. But as I was just saying to today's guest, Nick, I tend not to do any editing. It is what it is. We go out with imperfect action every time, starting small, as our friend Ken Moggy says. And we just gonna go with it with my messed up Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai introduction. As always, it wouldn't be the podcast if I got it right first time. People would think a clone had come in. But yes, as I mentioned, I'm so happy to have our guest today, Nick Kemp. And Nick is the founder of Ikigai Tribe. And I have been waiting for this call for so long. I think we first got in touch, I want to say like 2019. Something like that. Yeah, I first emailed, and because I had come across Nick's work when I got interested in Ikigai towards like the end of 2018. And then I found this guy saying, this Venn diagram is an Ikigai. It's all nonsense. And I was like, tell me more about this, because I love an iconoclast who, smashes down the beliefs. And Nick has a membership site as well as an amazing podcast that really looks at the Japanese perspective of Ikigai. If you haven't checked out Ikigai Tribe, make sure to go and subscribe straight away, because Nick's take is very much focused on meeting with experts, people who are doing research, and really interesting on the psychological perspective. Before we go into the main thing, I just want to apologize to everyone who is listening as well for perhaps you can catch the amazing amount of construction work which is happening still outside my house. I was very excited the other day when they finished. And then I saw the house 2 doors down, decided that they would start to rip their house down as well. So it's all going on in the Shitamachi. But currently Nick is living in Australia, in Melbourne. Having exciting times in the pandemic with his wife and his son, but he lived in Japan, in Tokyo, and also in Gifu, in his wife's hometown for a long time. So yeah, I want to welcome Nick. And as I mentioned, if you haven't already liked and subscribed to his podcast, you should definitely check that out if you're interested in Ikigai. So welcome. Thanks for being here today, Nick.
Thank you very much for having me, Jennifer. And I do remember it actually marks a sad chain of events when you first emailed, because I think I told you my wife lost 2 of her aunts. And then we thought we'd go back the following year. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. And then we actually called my father-in-law last night and found out someone else is close to death. So my wife hasn't been able to go back to Japan since, late 2000, or since, 2017 or 18. Oh, wow. So, it's been quite a ride for all of us, this whole pandemic. But as we'll discover today, having a sense of Ikigai in your life can help you get through these things. But thank you very much for patiently waiting for me to get my life together so I could come onto your podcast.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And our mutual friend Hasegawa Sensei has his idea of, Ikigai in the future. And so looking forward to this podcast happening and finally being able to speak to you has been, keeping me going and moving me forward. So it's really great to have you here. So Thanks. Tell me a little bit then, just to put in context your work with Ikigai. So how did you discover it? How did you realize that the Venn diagram wasn't all that it seemed? And then what kind of started this journey for you?
So it actually started a long time ago. It started in 1998. I returned to Japan to teach English. So I was in Japan in 1995 as a trainee chef, and then stayed there for a year, and then returned, I guess, 2 years later in 1998 to teach at Nova. And
it's all good.
Some people might know Nova, And on the lunch break on my first day at work, I think I was showing off my Japanese and trying to be this young, cool Aussie guy. And this Japanese coworker said, "Oh, Nick, what's your Ikigai?" And I'm like, "Oh, what's that?" And she gave this definition that intrigued me and just astounded me. And I was like, wow, you have a word that encapsulates the things you value, life purpose, and the reason to battle on through life. And so I have this vivid memory of that day, and I could take you where and when she said it. And the first thing I did was, after lunch, I went to all the foreign teachers and said, hey, there's this word Ikigai and it's amazing. And then the next day I wanted to talk to her about it more, but she'd been transferred. And then, life got in the way and I kind of just forgot about it. But it was one of those words I think I only needed to hear once to remember, because when you're learning Japanese, you just forget all these new words you learn. And then, 20 years later, I see this Venn diagram. And at first, actually, I was kind of inspired and thought, oh, yeah, that's Ikigai. I remember that word. But then I thought, after seeing it a few more times, I just thought, this doesn't make sense, because Japanese would never define a word like that. They would never define it with a framework. So I just thought, that's very un-Japanese. And then I thought, it just must be like a Western interpretation. And then, I think Google's algorithm decided to keep showing it to me. And I thought, someone should do something about this. Like, someone needs to correct this. And then a little voice was saying, you should do it, Nick. But I was thinking, well, I don't know what it is. All I know, it's not that Venn diagram, and it has to be something broader and deeper. And then one day on the World Health Organization website, I saw it. And I thought, right, okay, I'll do something about it. Yeah. So I thought, Japan's, giving me so much, and this is ridiculous. So I thought, I'll start. My first thought was, I'll buy a domain and see if I can start a podcast like you. And that's where it all began, really with no idea where it would lead me. Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So many people on this podcast have been saying, somebody should do that, and then that somebody ended up being me. So I feel like that for several of my guests, that's been the impetus to kind of move from a thought to action, just looking around going, there's no one else seems to be solving this, or no one else seems to care, but like, if it keeps coming back up, then maybe it's time for action. And so, of course, everyone can go and listen to your podcast, and really, really interesting guests. But for you, throughout the process, right? Through the process of doing this podcast, launching your membership site, doing all your writing, like what's been coming up for you around your Ikigai? What have you learned that's been new?
Oh, what have I learned? I've learned so much. So I think in the West, we have this tendency to try and define things and think, oh, okay, I get it now. It means this. But I've really learned that Ikigai and many other Japanese words, they do almost encapsulate a philosophy or a psychology. And so I'm constantly learning all these things about Ikigai every time I have a guest on. So, and it's just the way they phrase it. So Ken Moggy might phrase it as a spectrum of small things to life-defining goals. And then I'll have another guest like a researcher who lives in the UK, Yasuhiro Kotira, and he describes it as, intrinsic motivation, and it's experiential. It's something you experience. And then, reading the work of Kamiya Miyako, how it's something you feel, Ikigai kan. So I guess researching it, I've learned all these perspectives, or Japanese perspectives, but for me, it really is about intimacy, and it is about your social world and your relationships. So that's what I think Ikigai is for me. And when I say intimacy, something like this, we're having this intellectual intimacy. We're discussing Ikigai, and we're having a good conversation. We're feeling positive about it. You can have creative intimacy with others, experiential, intellectual, emotional, of course, physical. So, yeah, that's what it is for me, personally. Yeah.
I love that. And I love that your perspective, based on your own experiences and all the different perspectives that you've had, just makes Ikigai into something which is expansive rather than this, there's one point on the Venn diagram. And I think that's what I find is so fascinating about the concept. And I love how many times you said, for me, for me. And it's not like that you are the big I and the big I am or anything like that, but it's an incredibly personal experience of Ikigai that sort of doesn't come across in a lot of the English language communication around the topic. So I really appreciate that you've raised that to make people think about it in a different way.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a universal concept, so I don't think it's only unique to Japan. It's just Japan has this ability to encapsulate a very deep philosophical and psychological concept into one word, where we would have to have an hour conversation to kind of describe it all.
Yeah.
But it is very personal, and that Venn diagram is inspiring. And I guess sort of not the tragedy, but the unfortunate thing about that is the original creator, Andreas Suzunaga, who created it in Spanish, gets no recognition for it. And I think Japan or Japanese words have this mystique to them, So if you put a Japanese word on anything, it will probably become instantly popular. So
yeah, it's like a blessing and a curse of it. And I appreciate that you, naming our teachers. It's a really important point to like have those sources and to name them and thank them for what they've allowed us to learn and how we've been able to apply that, through our own experiences and maybe tell the story in a different way for a different audience. But yeah, like all these different voices which are involved there. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, even Mark Wynn, who merged the two concepts, I have immense gratitude for, because it is because of him that it led to me resolving to research it. And for him, it was just an idea, a simple idea to merge Ikigai with the Venn diagram after watching a TED talk. So it's astounding how the small actions of someone can result in, literally he changed the world. He impacted millions of people.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's amazing that he did it almost as an afterthought, and just thought, I'll write a blog post and I'll get my graphics guy to merge the two things, and that'll be it. And it took him less than, I think he said it was less than 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So
like on the back of a napkin. So just it's a great reminder for everyone who's having any thoughts in the world to like get them out there and see what happens. Yeah. They might take shape, they might influence someone's life. And like as a coach, I definitely, use the Venn diagram. Like it's a really 4 great coaching questions along with other things. And I imagine in your coaching program as well, like you touch on it, we talk about like what's useful, what's not, because they're great questions. What do you love? What are you good at? What can you be paid for? And what does the world need? Those are definite questions to be able to answer and to think about if you want to think about how you want to live your life. It's just one perspective of Ikigai.
Yeah. And if I think about what I'm doing now, in a way, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing something I love. I wouldn't say that I'm good at it, but I've definitely learned a lot. And in a way, it's something people need. And it, I do have all these people from different parts of the world connecting with me, and I'm fortunate to be paid for it. So there's this sort of irony. It's not Ikigai, but it's become a model of my business. And I'm very grateful. Yeah. So it can be someone's Ikigai. So that's another possibility and a way to think about it.
I want to come back to your personal Ikigai and this topic around intimacy in a few minutes, but just because you mentioned around like people around the world and how they've been connecting with you, what have you noticed in terms of like the quality or the texture of conversations, maybe before and during, I'm hesitant to say after the pandemic, around Ikigai? What's been different for you?
Well, it's interesting because it really didn't start until the pandemic resulted in me focusing on this business. So I had a different business.
Right.
And then literally within a week, I got all my clients saying, we can't pay you anymore. And I thought, well, I've started this Ikigai tribe thing. I'll take a gamble and I'll focus on it. And I was really committed to it. I actually sold I sold my favorite guitar to pay for rent. So I thought I'm not going to spend the next 2 weeks trying to find a client to do SEO or web design. I thought I'll do this business and commit to it. So that's where it sort of began. But yeah, I mean, people weren't really talking about the pandemic because it was still early days, I guess. I mean, it really all started when a lady from Dubai sent me an email saying, "Hey, Nick, I want to be an Ikigai coach. Do you offer a program?" And I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. No, I don't. And so I wrote back saying, well, no, I don't. But I guess you could do what I'm doing and just research it. And then a few months later, I had a sort of a spate of just within a week, about 4 people send me emails saying, do you offer a coaching program? Or I want to be a certified Ikigai coach. Do you offer a program? And I thought, wow, I've got all this marketing background. Clearly the market's saying there's a market for an Ikigai coach program. So that's how it started. And some of my podcast conversations have definitely touched on the pandemic. And there's one where I talked to America's sort of leading America's leading expert on Japanese psychology, Greg Creech. Right. And he was talking about how we can future forecast and look back and think about how we've behaved during the pandemic. And so obviously it's stressful for all of us. And we've probably got friends who've reacted differently, friends who are upset and angry and they've felt their individual rights have been violated. And then you've got friends who are helping others and doing their best to lift the spirits of others, to use a phrase he said. So that's something we touched on. I think a lot of people have discovered it is their relationships that matter the most. And at the end of the day, everyone's talking about, I can't wait to see so-and-so. I can't wait to hug my grandchildren for the first time. I can't wait to see my sister or my brother. Or travel. Travel's really important for people. So that's popped up a lot. But definitely the social world and the importance of relationships have been the focus of conversation in relation to, I guess, Ikigai and how the pandemic's impacted people's desire to find meaning in life and what are the most important things to them. It's their relationships.
Right, which is a nice segue into talking. Well done. You should be a podcast host, Nick.
I'll give it a go.
Yeah. Thinking about for your personal journey and sort of intimacy as Ikigai, can you explain a little bit more about how that shows up in terms of actions and behaviors each day?
Sure. Well, yeah. I have this idea that Ikigai is something you feel from my research rather than something you achieve or chase. And so for me, it is stealing a hug from a son, or one thing we do now, we almost play like brothers. We have this soft toy bird and we'll throw it throughout the house playing catch as hard as we can, to the shock and horror of my wife, who thinks we're going to. Yeah, exactly. So that's one of my Ikigai sources, is playing with my son like that, and it generates all these feelings of fun and connection. And again, it's this sort of playful intimacy. Then there are things I do for my routine. So I play guitar. So almost every day I'll just pick up the guitar, and if I come up with a riff I like, I'll just put that on my iPhone memo. And sort of have the intention one day to turn it into a song. But when I do that, I feel my life is moving forward, and I feel, I've expressed myself and I feel good. I just feel great. And then I can move on to, having my coffee or exercising. So it's all these small things that I'm really doing by myself. So, whoops, just something.
For those who are listening to the podcast, a picture has fallen off the wall, which maybe we can talk about. We can talk about that in a moment.
Maybe I'm talking too much. I don't
know. So I do, actually, I'm going to break it because I do a form of coaching called ORS, right? Organizational Relationship Systems Coaching. We talk about like different channels and different voices in the room. And so the picture falling off the wall and like drawing our attention away is something to either say that, what you said was really important. And this is like a picture I did of a galaxy. So maybe we're connecting to our galaxy brain, or we're definitely, there was something you said about like these small moments, right? It's about the speck of humanity. I might be stretching this too far, but what we can make this picture falling off the wall, or it just needs some more blue tack.
I think it's about, that's obviously creative expression for you. That's that painting. And for me, it's playing guitar. And so it doesn't matter if someone sees your painting or hears my song. If they do and they like it, great. But it's just a way for us to express ourselves. And that's something Kami Amiko, like someone I like to call the mother of Ikigai, touches on, the joy of creation. It's creating something new and unique, and that can become an emblem of who you are. And it doesn't really matter if someone sees that or not, just as long as you express yourself uniquely with your imagination. So that's a really fascinating aspect of her work.
Yeah. And that idea of just surrendering to the process without anything connected to the outcome. Right. So here we are, we're recording this podcast. Will anyone listen to it? Doesn't actually matter. Right. It's more about this moment, having this conversation, like that. When you described the feeling of, and I can imagine you like throwing that ball around with your son, like my heart softened. Like that's a beautiful moment of Ikigai, that, you're retelling your story, but through that, it's giving me that feeling of connection. And it's giving me that, like the wonder of being a parent and what it brings to like the richness to your life as well. So I'm getting a bit emotional, like talking about this, and that for me, like that's how my Ikigai shows up in those ways too, like having those realizations. And I mean, the moment.
The thing is, he's almost 18, so it's not like he's 10. It's so it's even better.
Oh, that's even more wonderful. Yeah.
So he's still willing to do that, and I love it. And so we do it every day. Actually, we've been doing it every day for the last couple of weeks. So it's become like a routine. This sort of random routine.
That makes it even more magical that he's a young man. Not because, of course, I'm putting my story of my 8-year-old, right? And I can fully imagine like us doing that. But at 18, that you both still have this like boyish energy. And as you said, like your wife's going, come on, your prefrontal cortex should already be fully grown. What's going on? But I know I love it. And I love that. Capturing that music with no intentions, no judgment. It's really, really beautiful.
It is fun. And it removes this stress of having to achieve something, or you just do it for yourself, and you can share it if you want. You mentioned that you spoke with Dr. Cortera, and of course, like in the Ikigai 9, there's those interesting discussions about having impact on someone, and this is maybe not that part of the Ikigai 9, what you're talking about right now, in terms of just feeling like
interested in lots of things and wanting to learn. Like that part of Ikigai, I think, is also really fascinating in their questions and their experience. So, but we've already touched a little on that. And I feel like what you've talked around with other types of intimacy, and how it's a state of being. Like what's been different for you now you've sort of got this awareness around Ikigai as intimacy?
I think what I've discovered with my coaching groups is if you can create trust, and if you can be the first one to be authentic and just say, right, I'm just going to be myself, it's amazing how quickly people will respond in kind. And it's sort of one of the most enjoyable aspects of my coaching is that the cohorts seem to connect quickly. By the second call, everyone's sharing. So I think what I've learned from Ikigai and this idea of social intimacy is if you can be self-authentic, it allows others to do so. And then you get into these deep and meaningful conversations and, you end up crying tears of joy or, sharing a happy or a painful memory. But there's this trust that allows people to do that. And it's amazing. There's no hints that anyone's judging you or anyone's holding back. They're all willing to share and also recognize other people's contribution. And so it allows us to really share ourselves and not be afraid of judgment or worried how we're going to sound. So that's that. I'd say it's in 2 words: self-authenticity is what I've learned from Ikigai. Yeah.
And so if there's someone who is listening now and thinking, that sounds good, what's the first step that I can do to be more self-authentic? Or perhaps, what gets in the way? Do you have any words of wisdom or advice for this person listening?
Yeah, so I think that the Western frameworks made Ikigai this goal to achieve. And it could be a meaningful, positive goal, but it's made something that's quite casual and natural to the Japanese become a fairly hard goal to achieve. So I would not relate Ikigai to something you achieve. It's not an end destination.
Yeah.
I think you can relate it to people or activities that already matter to you or to people who already mean to you. And if you're struggling to find an Ikigai source, so when I say source, it can be a relationship, it can be, it can be a hobby, it can be even a memory, or it can be an aspect of your work. But if you're struggling to find one, my advice would be to think of someone you care about and do something for them. So that's because people are probably your most important Ikigai. So that's what I'd recommend. And I'm sure everyone listening has someone they care about. Yeah.
What a great call to action. Just go and do random or in fact not so random act of kindness to reach out to someone, to do a kind thing, make someone a cup of tea if you're living with them. I don't know what kind of things I could do to my family today, making me a challenge.
One thing I recommended a few people in my cohorts was ring an old friend or try and get into contact with an old friend you haven't had any contact with for 10 years or 20 years. And it won't always work, but when it does, it brings back all these emotions and feelings of all the good times you had. And then you discover, their last 10, 15 years and what they're doing. And it can be, quite a meaningful and sort of this positive experience to reconnect with someone. So that's another thing you could do. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Recently, I got back in touch with my junior high school art teacher.
There you go.
So I contacted, the Old Girls Association and said, Mrs. Nelson, can you put me in touch with her? I've just written this children's book. And then she keeps coming up in like my mind of, like Ikigai feelings that I had in the past, and when I was like most in flow, and just really how much art meant to me at that time. And now it's kind of increasingly coming back. And it was so lovely to be able to email her and say, hey, Mrs. Nelson, I still can't use her first name, even though I'm mid-40s. She's like writing, hi. I won't say her first name to protect her privacy, but it was really great to be able to say. And I got the sense that when she read the email back to say like, wow, I made a difference in someone's life, and they're contacting me 25 years later, like that's a life well lived, right? That's like thinking of, Ikigai and the worth of living as an educator. I probably imagine that's like the emails and the letters that you always want to have, or to know that you made a difference, right? Yeah,
absolutely. That would have been a confirmation that she had this positive impact on you, and you're still thinking about it.
Yeah,
all these years later. So
yeah. So I often talk with my guests as well about sometimes like the dark side of Ikigai. So we've had people talking about like, they get kind of obsessed, they start to burn out, they maybe don't make space for other things in their life. So anything which you've come across that makes you think of the dark side of Ikigai?
Well, actually, there can be dark sides to Ikigai, almost to the extreme where someone's Ikigai actually can become power. So think of the power manager who commands sort of fear and respect. And because people respond to that in the workplace because they're afraid of him or her, it validates their role. And they get a sense of sort of Ikigai from it, thinking, people do respect me, they do respond to me, and they really like that role. But what they're doing is they're sort of destroying the lives of others, or at least making it very hard for other people to enjoy life. So that's one thing. Another thing is you can make your social roles, or one of your social roles, your only source of Ikigai. And so a good example of that is work, where you are working at the sacrifice, or to the point where you're sacrificing your most important relationships. And then you'd probably then argue, but hang on, I'm working for my family, or I'm working so my family have all these freedoms.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
That happens in Japan a lot, as you know. There's even a book that you might want to read. Right. So it says, Shigoto nanka ikigai ni suruna, meaning don't make your job your Ikigai. And so this author is basically saying, be careful not to make work your only source of Ikigai, which has happened, I think, in Japan for the last, since I guess from the 70s onwards.
Right.
So, yeah, I think we need to frame Ikigai as it's your life, whereas it's not just your work. And I mean, probably the real tragedy is a lot of people don't have Ikigai. They don't feel they have something to live for. They don't, especially in Japan too. So this sort of romantic idea that, all Japanese have Ikigai and they can immediately identify it, that's just not true, unfortunately. Even some of my friends just say, I don't really have one. So, yeah, I guess either not having it or sacrificing your most important relationships because you value work more than family, or maybe you don't believe that, but that's what you end up doing.
Yeah.
Or
what the commitment ends up being. Oh, there's so much I want to dig into from this. So let me go back to the first point you raised about like the power, right? So that's a really interesting perspective, very new to me. And so I'm just trying to process and think, as you were saying it, I was thinking, I can see how that shows up. So you get a certain response to a certain type of behavior, and that response
That
reminds
validates your
you that you
role,
are
yeah.
alive, that you are ikiteiru, because you're having impact on people. And I think that's really useful to remind everyone who's listening that, yeah, Ikigai isn't all like love and light. It's just being alive. And so you can be alive, having impact on someone in many different ways. So, of course, we get to choose what that is, but there's something quite intoxicating, isn't there, about like creating a response in someone.
Well, it can even be worse, because you could even make hate or vengeance your ikigai. So let's say you feel violated and someone's wronged you in some way, and you make it right. I'm going to make you pay for what you've done. And that becomes your ikigai. And then you think, right, this is meaningful. You did something bad to me. I'm going to get you back. And then you go about your life, seeking revenge.
Yes.
And it is a source of ikigai. It's just not a positive source. So there is
Count of Monte Cristo, Les Miserables, Billions, Princess Bride, which we've talked about on this podcast before with Robin Lewis. Like, what happens
That's
when
a good movie.
Yeah.
That's a good movie.
It's like that was his ikigai, right? And then, hang on.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You sort of, as you learn more about it, you think, wow, I never considered that there could be these ikigais that aren't positive and that aren't healthy. But
they're still there in the ikigai framework, because they give you a reason to live, like to keep up with the Joneses as well, right? To fulfill certain social roles. That's like the expectation we have. And then I love what you've said, because this is something I'm really passionate about, of having, multiple ikigais or sources of ikigai, which are not stuck with one role, especially because our lives are so seasonal, right? So yeah, if you had your ikigai was, being father to a 10-year-old, then like, how does that change when the shift is right? Your role as a father has changed as your son gets ready to go out into the world. But the same, so someone asked me this, I was talking about the pandemic, and I was in a conversation with a fellow entrepreneur, and she's like, it's really made me stop and go, who am I without my work? Like, I'm so tied up. My identity, my reason for being alive is so tied up to me as an entrepreneur, as the primary breadwinner, or as this kind of builder of businesses. Those titles, those identities are so connected, and so now that's all been taken away from me. Who am I? Why am I here? Scary stuff.
Exactly. So that highlights, I guess, the importance of multiple roles, but also having the ability, this is really Ken Moggy, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, is to disengage from all your social roles and almost reconnect with your inner child and just be free. And it kind of goes back to that playful nature or that creative nature. So maybe for you, it's painting, or just doing these things that make you feel, human or happy. And then if we do have roles, but we'll probably have 5 or 8 roles. Like, we're a son or a daughter, we're a brother or sister, we could be a parent, we're friends, we have our work related role. And even in the context of your friends, you could be the fun guy or the organized girl or the whoever, but within your circle of friends, you'll kind of have this role that's not really, you can't really put a name to it. And having a good spread and realizing they're all important and not sacrificing most of them for one is where I think you find a balance.
It's bringing up, I'm currently studying Orsk, because I mentioned, and pictures fall off the wall and so on. And one of those other things is about the different roles that we play, and talking about them in strata. So there's, the title roles that you've talked about. Then there's these kind of emotional roles, like being the organizer or being the fun guy, like these emotional roles. And then there's secret selves, which, and then below that is kind of ghost roles, which might be like existing in the system. But one thing which is very interesting, it kind of brings to this ikigai roles or sources of Ikigai is when you get like role fatigue. And you're like, you know what? I don't want to be the fun guy anymore. Why do I always have to be the fun guy? And that kind of, the shift, or when those roles maybe aren't acknowledged, and people don't necessarily realize like the emotional labor it takes to always be the person who brings lightness, for example, when you don't want to have to do that. So, but the point you raised about Monkey Sensei, maybe you can shed some light on this for me, because I've always found that pillar, which is like release yourself, right, to be the most
elusive.
Yeah, thank you for helping me. I can't even release myself from the language. Elusive to work on. So what's your take on what does releasing yourself mean, or how have you released yourself?
Yeah, so this was one of my questions to Ken, and I felt, wow, Ken, you're such a on Twitter, on YouTube, you're constantly sharing, gold nuggets of wisdom. You look very happy, and it looks like you've fully released yourself. And my question was that hard to do, and what I was asking, I guess, is you're fully accepted who you are, and he responds saying, yeah, look at me. I look like this, kind of a teddy bear. I've got fuzzy hair. I'm small. I'm not handsome. But once he fully accepted himself years ago, it just opened up his world to all these possibilities. And he didn't have to really concern himself about how he looked or how he sounded, or he could just focus on what he cared about. So I think releasing yourself is just deciding, I'm going to accept who I am. I'm not going to try and be someone else. And I'll just get on with what I care about. And it's almost simple. It's like we just overcomplicate who we think we should be. Obviously, with all this pressure on social media and advertising, we should look attractive. We should be, we should be thin rather than, healthy and fit, or we should have a certain amount of wealth or material goods. So I think it's this idea of being very comfortable with who you are and then expressing that. And then it opens your world up to all these possibilities. Yeah. And it's happened to me. So I can't tell you how nervous I was with my first cohort. But then I just thought I'd just do it. And I think one of the best compliments I got from one of my cohort members was, Nick, I really liked the program because you were authentic. And it really made sense. It's like, oh, wow, if I just be myself, that works. If you try to pretend to be someone else, you won't be able to keep that up, and you'll run into problems. So hopefully that answers your question.
I know it's great. I love it. And that idea of just live your life. And I'm working with a coach at the moment, Jim Fortin, and he talks about, like, you're going to get judged. Just accept that, like, judgment is going to happen. I think we talked about this when we had our pre-call. It's kind of coming to my mind, but and some people will like what you do and other people won't like what you do. But so just live your life. He drops the F-bomb, which I won't do today because I know my nephew is going to be watching this. So I'm sure he's using that fruitier language, but it's just like, just live your fucking life. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
On that, it's bizarre. You think, wow, I'm like you, I'm doing a podcast, I'm sharing all this content, and then I'll have people on LinkedIn just abuse me, just saying, oh, you shouldn't be keeping all this content secret, and just, if that person just said, hey, Nick, I'm really interested, can you share more? I'd help that person. So it is bizarre. People will either judge you, abuse you, attack you. And I always use humor. I'll quote what they say and put their name to it and sort of send it back. And usually confuses
them. Kiss your mother with that mouth.
It's funny. People will judge you. And I think that's the secret, is not to be concerned with others. Just do what you want to do. And then when you do concern yourself with others, it's about the people you care about and helping them, and not worrying about the people who you don't even know, who seem to have a problem with you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that I think the challenge for anyone who's Ikigai kind of, if it ends up with you being in the public eye, actually so many of my guests have talked about that, like the judgments that they've had, the haters, not that they've not called them haters, but as I have done, I remember one, like Jess Garrity, she talks about Kudo, and she decided that she would try, I can never remember the name for it, but the Kudo, which is like the archery on horseback, and the sports version, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember anyway. And she got like so much pushback from people saying, how can you start this other thing when you haven't mastered this yet? And she's like, well, mastery isn't my goal. And if it is for you, great, you go and live your life. But why are you bringing this to me?
It's funny, isn't that? Once you do have some social profile, if you go and do something else, it's like people have these rules about what you can and can't do. It's like, where do these rules come from? Like, I'm just exploring something I'm interested in. And how does that become a problem for you? Is it Yabusame?
Yes, that sounds right. Yeah. Thank you.
I remember Tim Ferriss did that.
Right.
He was attempting to do a documentary series years ago. Like, this is more than 10 years ago, and that was the first episode, and it was amazing, but it didn't take off. And then he did another series, and he did all these challenges, how to learn how to drum within 5 days and speak Filipino in 5 days. But Yabusame would be, that's quite a challenge.
Yeah. Hey, well, dangerous. Please check out Jess's video in the links below. It's very cool. And watch it and follow her on Instagram. It was really interesting. But there was something I was going to say. It wasn't about Tim Ferriss. Oh well, my genius has gone. Something that you'd said had come to me, and then I started to think about Tim Ferriss. So I haven't listened to his podcast. That's all right. It's all right. He's a big Japan lover as well, isn't he?
Oh yeah,
for a while.
He loves it.
But hasn't visited for a bit. I cannot remember what that point was. It was obviously very true. And as soon as we
it'll come back
stop,
to you,
it'll come back, and I'll be like, oh, well, that will give us an excuse to meet again. But what I want to ask you is the most important question, which is, what is the question that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you yet?
I guess that would be, I guess the question would be, do we really find Ikigai? Do we feel it? And my answer would be, we feel it. Yeah. So we feel it, when you hug someone you love, or when you're pursuing a hobby that excites you, or when you call an old friend, or when you discover a new word. Like I discovered so many new Japanese words that are similar to Ikigai, and they represent another philosophy or another psychology. Like I don't know if you know Yutori, this idea of space and how it's applicable to not just your mental, your spiritual, your physical, your financial. So it's like another world to dive into. Having a love of learning. But it's the feeling from doing these things. It's the feeling of zest and
great word.
That's available to everyone. And then there's no pressure to achieve anything. It's just doing things that are meaningful to you.
I love it.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think you've triggered what my memory was that I was saying. Thinking of how important it is to not be in a box, to experiment, to be expansive, just do the things which make you feel alive and give you a reason to show up again tomorrow. to show up this afternoon. You know, for me, that's the biggest essence of Ikigai is like, I'm not done.
No,
I'm not done here.
No.
So and to have that and to find it, and as you said, there's a view that, you know, all Japanese people can easily tap into that. But when we look at the Google search, in Japanese, the most kind of searched, what do you call it? You do SEO, so you know it. Like the two words together is Ikigai nai.
Yeah.
Which is very sad, but not altogether unexpected. So I think just having this openness to feel it and to have these small things is a really amazing takeaway to have from our conversation today. So I feel like, I know I'm not going to get there because it's not a place to be, it's not a destination, but I feel I'm on the right track, if I can use this metaphor, that I feel very connected with many of the things in my day. So I want to give you your closing comments, Nick. Any final messages that you have for listeners of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai? The floor is yours, sir.
Oh, wow. Not really. Just it's been a joy to share all this and learn from you too. And it's I think it's just care about something bigger than yourself and share it with others, and then life will be good. So that's what I'd say. Yeah.
What a wonderful message to end on. So, and remember, everyone, we have our homework. Our call to action is to do something kind for someone we love, or to reach out to an old friend. So make sure you commit to that after this call. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I will continue to be subscribing to your podcast and listening in. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
So do I, hopefully in person. So I should be there next year. So that would be fabulous. A coffee or dinner.
Yes, let's do it. All right. Thank you so much. Mate. And thank you to everyone for listening today. Bye.